I bought this LED strip lighting on Amazon. It was a little under $8, including free 2-day shipping with Amazon Prime. It's 5 meters long. It's just flexible. There are LEDs, surface mount LEDs on here. You can cut it every 3 LEDs, so 3 LEDs would go from here to there. So you can cut it in that sort of increment. And then there are little copper pads over here. You can clean off the rubber coating that makes them waterproof and solder to them, and then put on some RTV silicone or whatever you want to waterproof it if you like. The back of it has 3M peel and stick tape on there, and I'm putting it underneath my shelf above my reloading bench. I'll be showing that here shortly, but there it is as it came on the reel in the mail from Amazon. And if you connect 12 volts to it, it'll pull about 25 watts. So that's about 2 amps. Whoa! You can see how bright it is. Just ridiculously bright. The camera sort of futzes around with the sensitivity, so you really can't tell for sure. But yeah, it's about like a 120 watt light bulb, I think, as far incandescent bulb as far as light equivalents. It alternately calls it cool white and super bright white in the product description. It's a little bit of a bluish tinge. I wouldn't call that a really warm, but it's a very bright white. I think it'll be really good for task lighting. I'm not sure what the color of the spectrum is, but I think it'll be just about right, the super bright white. They make it in all different colors, but I just opted for the plain, inexpensive white kind. So I'll go ahead and run this out, and as I said, it's 5 meters, it's about 16 feet long for the whole thing, and I probably will use every bit of that underneath there and really brighten up my bench. So I'm going to run it off into 3 foot or slightly longer sections, maybe 5 strips, and adhere it to the underneath side of my bench using the surface, the peel and stick backing. And I'll probably will polyurethane coat the wood on the underneath side of the shelf just to give it a little more to stick to. Well, I changed my mind a little bit. This is the shelf that's directly above the reloading bench. This is the underside facing down toward the bench. Instead of putting polyurethane on it, I just painted it white. Put 3 coats of white spray paint on it. And I'm going to mount the LEDs to that. So I'll be back and we'll show it all mounted up, and I'll power it up and we'll see what it looks like. In order to remove the rubber material, this clear rubbery overlay that makes them waterproof, I take an X-Acto knife and I come in just flat right over top of the solder pads, skim just the top of the solder pads and pry up. Sometimes prying between the two to get underneath them will peel the material away, so you're not cutting it so much as peeling it up. That separates it from the solder pads, and then once you get it clear of the solder pads back a little bit, then I'll take the diagonal cutters, come in, peel it up and snip it off flush. And that's how I remove enough of that insulating material that I can make connections, electrical connections, so one's plus 12 volts and the other's comp. When you're finished stripping the material, it should look something sort of like this. You can see where I've stripped away the material back to about here. So all of this is exposed, including the 2 leads or solder pads there that we'll be connecting to. Okay, we've got all 5 strips on now. Wasn't too bad. It's important to remember the orientation. Got to keep the polarity straight. So we started off with the red lead, the plus 12 on the top here. So it goes all the way down to the other end and then turns back around and comes back up to this side. And you have to keep, when you make the connections on the other end, make sure you keep the polarities plus 12 to plus 12, minus to minus, and it's probably easier to show over here on this side. Coming around here, the plus 12 is on the top going down, so when it wraps back around it comes back up on the bottom here, which just happens to be red. The red really doesn't correspond to any particular polarity in this case, but in this red and yellow, it doesn't really matter.
I just used whatever jumpers I had, but in this case the red one is the positive, so it's positive here, so it'll be top of the top one, the next one down it'll be on the bottom, and then it'll be on the top of the middle one, and then when it wraps back around it'll be on the the top of the middle one, it'll come back around on the bottom of this one, then back on the top of the bottom one going out, if that makes sense. And same with the negative, it's just backwards. It's on the bottom of the top one because it's black, and then it comes back around and it'll be on the top of this one. So another way to keep this straight is if you look over here, you'll see this little black resistor. There's a little black rectangle there, that's a surface mount resistor. It'll be on this side of the cut line on the top. It'll be on the other side of the cut line on the next one down, so they alternate all the way down. And that way you can really tell at a glance that you've got the polarity straight as far as putting the strips on correctly, and then you should have a configuration that looks sort of like this at the end, where you just have them, well, it's kind of hard to describe, it's easier to see it on video, but you'll have, on any pair that you're connecting, the outer ones will be connected and the inner ones will be connected. But if you ever need to know, right, there should be little pluses and minuses down here that are right next to the cut line so you can see what you're doing. I did, on the very last one, I went ahead and put the strip on and stripped the insulating material off after adhering the strip to the bottom of the shelf. It seemed a little more difficult to do it that way, but you could do it that way just fine too. I ended up cutting a little bit more of the insulating off, but I'm getting ready to cover that, as you'll see here in just a second. What I'm going to use to cover it is good old Dow Corning 732 multi-purpose sealant. It's really just 100% silicone. It's clear in this case, usually called RTV, room temperature vulcanizing. If you don't have any of this on hand, you can even make do with some shoe goo. But I'm just going to go ahead and use the RTV, and I'll just blob it on there. It's a little conductive. It's got acetic acid in it, so it's a little conductive before it's completely cured. But once it cures, it's probably the same stuff as the material here, the insulating rubbery material is. It sort of feels like RTV silicone. But I went ahead and pushed all these down so they'll stick. I don't think there'll be any trouble with adhesion sticking to the paint. Flipping it upside down, I think they'll stay on there pretty much forever. They should be permanently bonded. So I'll get started on that, and you'll see, I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like all lit up here. It's pretty impressive. It's probably 100 watt equivalent incandescent, but it's nice and uniform. It's spread over the entire shelf. You'll notice this is the front of the shelf, so I set it back a little over about an inch back before I started it. I didn't want them all the way to the back. I thought that'd be a good place to have the maximum light intensity over the bench, but it should cover the entire bench when I put it in, just really light up the whole surface. Pretty impressive. Pretty happy with it so far. Well, here it is. Wiring is finished, and I have it attached temporarily to a 12 volt supply I have laying around. I'll be replacing that with a smaller one when I do the installation. But it's 12 volts. Go ahead and power it up and see what it looks like. Yeah, it's just, doesn't come across in the video, but it's just goofy bright. Yeah, that'll be really nice when I get that hooked up on the bench. So next we'll do the install. Get the shelf back in and get it wired up and see what it looks like. Well, here the shelf is installed, and we're looking up at the bottom of the shelf. You can see the 5 strips of LED lighting, and then you can also see the RTV silicone that I used to seal the connections soldered at the end over top of the jumpers. Really probably isn't necessary. It's low voltage, it's only 12 volts, but I figured I'd be moving some conductive things in and out of there, and it's possible something would bounce over and hit it and short it out, and I didn't want that to happen. So I went ahead and covered it with some RTV and just let it settle under its own weight.
It's cured, and it's just a rubbery coating, just about like what's on top of the LED strip lighting. Well, the LED strip lighting is mounted at the bottom of the shelf and everything's wired, so it's all ready to go, but this is with it turned off. This is just ambient lighting looking back into the shelf on my reloading press. This is the reloading bench area. You can see the two presses on there. And if I turn on the LED strip lighting overhead, it really brightens it up quite a bit. The camera is always trying to adjust for the constant level of light intensity, so you really can't tell how much brighter it is on there. In fact, the presses themselves look darker with that bright, blindingly bright backlit wall there, but actually inside the press is quite a bit brighter now. You can sort of tell a difference though just from the flare. When you can get some idea just from that flare there that it really is lighting up the place quite a bit. And I do think it's probably the equivalent of about 120 watts of incandescent light spread out evenly over the entire bench. I really like the effect. I think it's turned out well. This is perhaps a better view than we saw before with the zoomed out view. Just looking into the press, this is my single stage press. To me, the press looks darker with my eye than it does in the camera. The camera makes it look brighter. The camera's always trying to get the same brightness level, so it's amplifying the light more in this case. But with my naked eye, I look in there and it's bright enough I can see. Really am not comfortable doing fine detailed work, picking up small parts, that sort of thing. But if I turn on the LED strip light above, it really brightens it up quite a bit. Now to me, with my eye looking at the press, it actually overall looks a bit brighter than in the camera. It's not as nearly as glaring as the camera's making it look, and it's just very well lit. It's probably 3 to 4 times brighter with my naked eye. I know it doesn't look that way on the camera, but with my naked eye it actually looks about 3 or 4 times brighter, which is probably bright enough that I'm not going to need any kind of task lighting or any kind of light mounted to the press itself, which I'd like to avoid. If I do decide to add some more lighting, I think I'll just put some task lighting, it's very directional LED lighting on the shelf above, pointed directly into the opening of the press, maybe from both sides, and maybe do that to my single stage and my progressive press. But I think I'm going to be able to get by with both presses just with the LED strip lighting, which is quite a nice bonus. Not having any wires or anything on the press is nice, and not having a lot of extra lighting devices hanging off the front of the shelf. This LED strip lighting is up out of the way, which I really enjoy. So I hope this has been a good project for you to watch, and it's certainly been an interesting one for me to do. It only took about an hour of actual working time, and a lot of that was just disassembling my vertical reloading bench. But I think it'll really improve your reloading bench and hopefully help you make some better rounds and help you enjoy reloading more.